did the drawing with the isometric so that you could walk up a tower that was forever like building onto itself. Now that Diablo 3 is going to be built around this 3D engine, I was wondering if you guys had any plans to bring that level back, or if there was any way really of doing that, because it seems kind of like it's impossible.
That would be pretty hard, wouldn't it? The Escher stuff?
Pat, do you have some thoughts on that?
Well, we're always trying to add depth and layers to our environments just to make them more visually interesting and sometimes, more gameplay interesting. An infinite staircase, I don't know.
From a 3D point of view, obviously that's really hard to do. I think there are some thoughts on having some levels that will be a little bit in that direction, but it's not quite the same thing as in D2 where you can get away with that.
Thank you.
Hi guys, the game is great so far. The improvements from last year's BlizzCon, even with sound and UI, is great. I wish I had a sound question. Unfortunately, I don't. I was wondering if you could give us an idea on maybe how long Diablo 3 is in comparison to Diablo 2. Like, is it? I know length is kind of arbitrary because some people will power through the game and some people will take longer times. But let's say if you took Diablo and Lord of Destruction, is Diablo 3 quote unquote longer or shorter, about the same in length? Can you give us any kind of ideas on what you're shooting for?
Kevin, would you like to get that one? Kevin, why so handsome?
Who me?
Yeah. Yeah, you.
Honestly, you kind of...
Content designer?
To some extent, I have to give you a non-answer to that. You kind of already answered it, is that it's dramatically different depending on who's playing, and to a large part because of the randomness. A good example of this is if you're walking down one of the roads early in the game, you could come across a scene, this one that we showed in Crafting Sanctuary panel earlier, where a bunch of zombies come out of the ground and you kill them. And it's a pretty cool fight, but it's going to take you probably less than a minute to do. That same scene could be a 20-minute dungeon, next time you roll it. So it's dramatically scalable according to the random elements you come across, let alone the playstyles. It's really hard to say. It depends what you roll.
Thank you.
So I'm curious if you considered any support for Grails. It was kind of popular in D2 to keep track of all the unique and set items that you personally found. So I'm hoping D3 will offer an automatic way to keep track of that sort of thing.
Maybe. Don't know yet, to be honest with you. But I tell you what, I will put it on my list of things to look at and consider.
Hey guys, my question was about since PvE and PvP are so separate now, if there was going to be a way that since in PvE you would want a completely separate spec for killing monsters than you would in PvP, if those would be like maybe a function like dual spec or something like that.
So we haven't decided about that yet, primarily because there's a lot of things that drove the desire for dual specking in World of Warcraft, which is, I believe, where the request comes from. And a lot of it was that there were a lot of different things that pulled a WoW character in a lot of different directions. Like, you had to have the perfect PvE spec if you were raiding. But if you always also wanted to PvP, then you also had to have a different spec. For Diablo, a PvP spec is still a decent, it's almost always focused on damage, at least partially. And as a result of that, it's never a terrible PvE spec either. So the need to kind of manage multiple specs per character may not be necessary. I'm not saying that we wouldn't do it. I'm saying that we don't want to add it unless we need it, because we want to get it to you guys as quickly as possible. So we really analyze each feature to see if we actually do need it. And the other factor to consider there too is that Diablo characters tend to be more, I don't want to use that word, that's negative. Well, I'm going to use it anyway, disposable. You tend to make a lot more Diablo characters than you make a WoW characters. So that's a question we have too, is do we need to have dual specs, or would people just build a PvP character and a PvE character? And we're not sure about that. So once we're sure, if we definitely see a need for dual specking, then we'll add it.
Thank you.
Hey guys, I just wanted to know if you guys were thinking anything about how to function with the world. I know you said that you didn't really have anything on the trade aspect or how you were going to function with people dealing with each other and that the trade chat was terrible or not awesome. Do you have any idea about players interacting with other players outside of the PvE experience, like actually going out and questing or anything of that nature?
Yeah, we have a trade system in the game now. It's actually disabled on the floor, but and it allows for you to trade objects and I think money with other players if you want. So and it's basically just a typical, you put your stuff on one side, they put their stuff on the other, you both say okay, and it swaps the items. Of course, you can always just throw things on the ground. And one of the things that we find when we're playing together is that when people's bags fill up, if they, a little bit less now since salvage came in, but especially if they find something that they think, oh, this will be good for my friend, a lot of the times they'll just run by them and toss it on the ground because they'll see it. And, people are like, anything shiny hits the ground and they just naturally vacuum it up. That's actually the quickest way.
Thank you.
Hello, just a quick lore question. Do both genders of each class have the same backstory, and if so, does that include the barbarian?
It's interesting you mentioned the barbarian because that's the only one that doesn't have the same backstory because the male barbarian is the same barbarian from D2, but the female is a younger version. So she obviously isn't the bald barbarian from Diablo 2.
So every other gender is identical for the other classes?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Having played everything from the Lost Vikings through 100,000 hours of World of Warcraft Arena, I hate to have to change my question because you said it, but the way I interpreted another answer that you guys have put forth is that you plan to not support competitive play because you feel that to do so you would have to deteriorate the essence of the fun of the game. And I know that as a company you have always been about the fun of the game, and that's why I've played everything through, the Lost Vikings to 100,000 hours of WoW, but I never would have played 100,000 hours of WoW if there was never the need to get better. And I feel like you guys, since, you turned StarCraft into a nation's esport through its balance, I feel like if anyone's capable of balancing competitive PvP, I'd like to have the crowd roar for me right now because I think you guys can do it. And I don't want to have to change the fundamentals of anything else you've done because you've made every improvement to Diablo 3 that I would have made myself, but the one thing that I don't want to see you do is drop competitive play. So if everybody loves Blizzard and agrees with me, will you guys support it? Based on the community at BlizzCon and based on my question, will you support competitive play, even though you said you wouldn't?
I think there's your answer.
Well, actually, I think based on that, I could say if BlizzCon demanded it, then I would, but apparently BlizzCon doesn't demand it. But so I can tell you that you're right. Blizzard knows a lot about balancing games, a lot, enough to know when to give up. I spend a lot of time with this. I'm a big fan of StarCraft before I came to Blizzard, and I play a lot of Star 2, and I talk to those guys a lot, and I know the sacrifices they made to make an esport, and that was okay because that was their game. That was everything they wanted to be. It's not what we want Diablo to be. And so we're not, and what it comes down to is we're just not willing to give up what we want Diablo to be in order to make an esport.
I'm still going to love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jay, turning the train wreck around there. As a good segue, I've got a question regarding the Battle.net 2 integration, which is obviously going to be a very important part of Diablo 3, like all Blizzard games before it. it's been a few months since we've had the launch of StarCraft 2, and I'm curious to know whether or not you guys have been paying attention to some of the hits and misses of BattleNet 2, specifically things like absence of chat channels, and probably more important for the foreigners watching the show, when you buy the game in a different country, can you play with anyone in the world? Or are you sort of stuck in Southeast Asia or North America or Europe? Are you going to play with anyone?